Hello and welcome to another episode of the Silk and Steel podcast. I'm your host, Carl Zha. Today we have a very special guest, Angelica, all the way from Taiwan. Sorry, how do you pronounce your last name, Angelica?
Angelica Ong. Yeah, it's Ong. It's
Angelica
you can
Ong.
pronounce it Ong. In Chinese, it's Ong. Yeah, like
So
Yong.
Angelica Ong, how would I describe you? You know what? I better let you introduce yourself. I think you would
Sure.
do a
Hi.
better justice.
Hello, everybody. My name is Angelica Ong, and I'm a pro-nuclear activist. That's my job. But I also do a lot of commentary online, mostly about what I consider the Sinosphere, China, Taiwan, and beyond. Basically, I think there's a lot going on right now, and I've always commented on geopolitics since I was doing reporting. I was a business reporter for a long time, and I think actually the geopolitics part is shaping up for the it's taking up a lot of my mental space, let's say, but I can't really say it's what I do because nobody's really paying me for it apart from my lovely subscribers on Substack. So subscribe.
I'm curious about your background. So you're obviously based in Taiwan, but you do
Hmm.
sound like you are speaking North American English. Did you spend significant time in America?
I'm a dual citizen. My mom
Okay.
actually was so determined to make me an American that she was pregnant with me and she kind of hid her pregnancy under a big coat and did the whole giving birth to me in California thing, so I would have birthright citizenship. I didn't really return to the US until my college days, but
Mm.
I've lived outside of Taiwan before that too. And I just really took to it. I felt like as soon as I arrived in America, I was an American. I assimilated very well, um, given the milieu, and I ended up in Los Angeles, where I was actually working in the food industry. I was a pastry chef and line cook when COVID hit, and that was when I came back to Taiwan.
Where in
Before
LA?
that,
Oh, I'm sorry. Where?
sure,
Because I
no
live in
problem.
LA.
Yeah, I was living in like the shittier West LA basically, and I
Well,
cooked
West
in a lot
LA
of.
is the nicer part. What are you talking about? Like I
No, no,
lived
no.
in.
There's like a little shitty triangle right between Santa Monica and West LA, right under Brentwood. So I lived in the shitty triangle between three very nice areas. But I cooked in very nice restaurants in all of those areas, so it was perfect for me. I never thought I'd return to Taiwan again or to journalism because I thought that was all in the past. And then COVID hit, and all of a sudden it was like, do you remember when the NBA did their big shutdown? And that was when everybody disappeared from the restaurant. And after a few days, the restaurant was closed for the rest of COVID. And I flew back to Taipei and I was feeling very, very lost. Like, what's going on with my life, you know? And we had no idea how long this thing was going to last. I didn't know when I left LA that it was basically like leaving LA as a home forever with only a suitcase, basically. Went back to journalism in Taipei. It was kind of like Freaky Friday because it was what I did in my 20s. So I became a business reporter at Taipei Times, the first news outlet I ever wrote for. Yeah, but I quickly grew beyond that and really became interested in energy. And that's where my journey took me eventually.
How did you transition to a pro-nuclear activist?
Yeah, actually, when I first got into energy, my big thing was offshore wind, right? I wouldn't know this till later, but basically, in order to fill the gap that's going to be caused by the DPP campaign promise to shut off all the nuclear power plants on this island, they have to find another source. It's politically impossible to um, build any more coal plants, and they needed something that was renewable. And Taiwan is an island half the size of Tasmania, but we have around the same population as all of Australia, plus a highly developed manufacturing economy. So we needed renewable energy in bulk. We knew solar wasn't going to do it. 70% of the island is mountainous. There's hardly any flat arable land. So it's going to have to be something else. And offshore wind seems to provide the kind of bulk energy that would be needed to replace nuclear. So the government actually invested billions and billions of dollars into the scheme. And all the European developers kind of found a lifeline, because this was when 2016, 2017, when their feed-in tariffs were starting to get cut in Europe. So coming to Taiwan seemed like a bonanza for them. And for President Tsai, it made for a very campaign-ready slogan. It's like, we're following in the footsteps of Europe, and this new technology is going to free us from generating with atomic power forever. We will deliver on the DPP's longstanding promise of a nuclear-free homeland. So I plunged myself into this industry and quickly became very well known, because I think one of my strong points is able to explain things from the Taiwanese point of view and the Western point of view and back again. And by the time I emerged on the scene in 2020, there's already like heavy friction between the Western developers and the Taiwanese government. In short, they tried to do something that was probably questionable in the first place, replacing firm, cheap nuclear power with expensive, complicated offshore wind that is intermittent. But it could have been done better. The whole scheme was very, very ill-advised from the point of view of how it was set up. So I discovered through becoming a very good offshore wind reporter and quite well known, and I ran my own newsletter, and it was doing actually quite well. Certainly, I was surprised that I was able to make it on my own, which is hard in the media world these days. But I discovered through this process that offshore wind wasn't a great match for Taiwan as an energy source. And the more I learned about how the grid works and how much we needed like stability in the grid, the more I realized turning off the nuclear power plants was just the most terrible decision for Taiwan you can imagine. And I started on the side campaigning more for nuclear energy, and for a while it was just purely a passion project. I wasn't getting paid for it. In fact, I was getting a lot of blowback from the offshore wind community for it. But I kept going, and funnily enough, I went to COP like 2 years ago. It was the one in Dubai, COP 28, and I got a nuclear. I got a gig promoting nuclear energy there from a philanthropist. So everything seemed to line up. I returned to Taiwan and started doing nuclear activism full time, because I don't think it's just the right choice for Taiwan. I'm actually increasingly convinced that it's the correct choice for the planet, or at least the 100% wind and solar solution is not just going to work out. And I'm very glad I took that decision, because that's a lot edgier to say 2 years ago than it is now.
So my question is, why is a ruling party of Taiwan, DPP, have an anti-nuclear platform? Because nuclear power has been in Taiwan since like 1980s, 1970s. It's been there for a long time. Why is there a drive to remove the nuclear power from Taiwan? I'm trying to understand that.
Actually, anti-nuclearism has been there ever since the inception of the DPP, and it's very understandable, because they were formed formally as a party, and in their original charter was we're going to have a nuclear-free homeland, and it's very, very understandable given the times. It was the 80s. It was right after Chernobyl. It was truly more of an unknown back then than it is now that atomic energy is super safe and important for our planet, right? So I actually don't question the DPP's decision to be anti-nuclear back then. Maybe I would have been too. What is really bad for Taiwan is that it worked very well, as an electoral vote getter. And somebody I tried to lobby in the DPP world actually put it to me once. She said, Angelica, you need to realize that anti-nuclear activism came up hand in hand with the pro-democracy movement in Taiwan. So you're never going to convince those people to be pro-nuclear energy or even to accept nuclear energy, because for them, it will mean giving up on their deepest values.
Is that because the whole nuclear energy was put in place during the martial law, during the Jiang Jingguo era, when KMT ruled Taiwan? Is that, and because DPP grew out of the kind of the opposition to KMT, so that's why they oppose whatever KMT did? Is that why they're anti-nuclear?
Yeah, I would say that's a big part of it. First of all, those nuclear power plants were big and very potent symbols of what the state, powerful and unfree state was able to do. And even though they produced a lot of economic output, nobody ever thought to get the consent of the people living near them or of Taiwan in general. So it was a great way to hit the KMT government for not caring about the people, not caring about their health, only caring about profits, only caring about money. And for a while, I think people forget now, because the current DPP is very much in the neoliberal middle now, and very much like the like-minded democracy playbook, and it takes the achievements of TSMC as its own. But back then, the DPP was actually kind of a leftist, more left entity. And it was not just anti-nuclear power, it was broadly, I would say, almost anti-development. So everything dovetailed with their sort of NGO, human rights lawyer, anti-development, anti-nuclear, pro-environment mindset. So they
anti-growth.
I would say anti-business. They had a vision of Taiwan, I would think, that at one point seemed almost like agrarian, or I don't know how to describe it, but it's you see it in the Western left too, the pro-environmentalist, anti-big business kind of leftism. So that they held on to that, and they still completely own the activist space, the NGO space. But obviously, once they got into power, they realized, hey, economic growth is really nice, not just because it's now that we're in power, we are benefiting from it, but also it's a vote getter. It's what you need to keep being elected.
Now, I remember I first discovered you on Twitter because you post a lot, and I remember you used to be a quite vocal supporter of the DPP. But recently there has been a big shift of your political stance. I mean, this is one of the reasons I invited you to the show, to share with us your own political. I'm interested in your own political transformation. How did you become from like a more pro DPP position? Now you shifted to the other side, but you is it mostly because of your pro nuclear activism?
I would say that sometimes your shift in beliefs can happen like a bankruptcy, right? It happens slowly by slowly and then all at once. And I feel like that's what happened. That's why everything seems so sudden and precipitous. Like people are literally like, Angelica, what happened to you? Are you okay? Are you manic? Do you need help? Have you gone crazy? Have you cracked under the pressure of living in the most dangerous place in the world? Have you
wait? Who asked you Who is saying Taiwan is the most dangerous
Oh,
place in the
that
world?
was that was a cover on The Economist a couple of days ago, so that's an in-joke. But people really thought I was maybe cracking under the pressure of Taiwan being under the Chinese invasion threat. They also thought
because
maybe
I have maybe I should ask you, do people on Taiwan feel like they live in a very most dangerous place in the world currently?
No, of course not. But I will say this: people do hear the ticking of the reunification clock a lot louder than they used to when I got here in 2020. So it seemed like everything, the flipping inside me happened, seems like it all at once, right? And it was all this year. But quite frankly, my belief in the DPP and their version, not just of human rights and democracy, but in terms of how viable they are at governance and how truthful they are when it comes to describing what's happening right now or in the past, or how capable their policies are, that's been a gradual process of loss. And it started with me discovering that, yeah, I think they understand quite well, they're not stupid, the situation with Taiwan's grid and our economic need for nuclear energy, and why renewable energy is just never going to make it to the level they say they want it to go in Taiwan for various systematic engineering related, economically related reasons, right? We are an island grid with poor renewable resources. And they, you know, President Lai, I'm so sorry, President Tsai, this was during President Tsai's second term when it was transparently obvious that her energy policy was a big fat fail. She went on to declare that Taiwan is going to be net zero by 2050. I mean, I just felt like I was so disappointed with her because when I first came back to Taiwan, this was, remember when I was feeling really lost and not really knowing where my life was going to go, and feeling really unconnected with Taiwan after being away on and off for so many years. I mean, I've worked in Taiwan before, so it's not totally foreign, but I truly believe I would never live in Taiwan again as a full-time resident. So I really got a lot of comfort from the Taiwan aura up moment during the COVID. I don't know if you remember when we're doing a lot of cute things like, I don't know, exchanging care packages with Lithuania, or having Czech politicians coming to speak at our government about how great it is to stand up for democracy and how it's scary, but in the end it's all worth it, and that sort of thing. And I thought President Tsai herself was a very charming politician. I thought she was cool. I thought she was a girl boss. I also thought that she knew what she was doing. Like she knew, like, she had a plan for where she was going with the country, and that faith, that fandom, I was a Thai fangirl, really took a hit when I saw how disingenuous she was about the country's energy policy. And that really raised the question in my mind of how truthful she is, how capable she is about everything else. And it opened the door also because the pro-nuclear activism world is full of KMT and TPP supporters. There's hardly any DPP in there at all. And if they are, they're probably nutcases who wants Taiwan to get a bunch of nuclear weapons. So I slowly by almost by osmosis, absorbed the fact that the DPP is not a straight dealer when it comes to a lot of what they're saying, either about our current situation or about our past, our history, and also about our military situation. So the military in Taiwan is actually still a very much KMT-dominated institution. And this is something that the DPP can't do anything about. They can sort of parachute in a few guys at the top with their political affiliation, but the rank and file of the military tend to come from military families, and military families are the bluest of the blue. And
so I have to stop for a second,
sure.
Angela, because most of my audience, the Anglophone audience, they need sometimes
They need something
to the
unpacked.
basics.
Yeah.
You know, we're using this acronym DPP KMT. So KMT is a party that came with Chiang Kai-shek from mainland after the
Exactly.
defeat in the Civil War in 1949, and they had been ruling Taiwan as a military dictatorship until basically 1980s. After I think when was the martial law lifted, like 1987 or something.
Something like that. Yeah, around that time.
So for a long time, it was actually known as now it's known as White Terror, the period from 1947 to 1987, and but the KMT they, because they ruled Taiwan with the iron hand, so they generated a lot of opposition. And KMT was very good at cracking down. They killed all the red opposition first. They killed all the commies, and then so what was left is kind of the liberal opposition that was formed under the DPP. And DPP, they eventually, after Taiwan liberalized and became an electoral democracy, eventually DPP will start winning election. And now today, DPP have been the ruling party of Taiwan for almost like a decade now, right?
Yeah. Tsai Ing-wen got elected in 2016, and the DPP haven't lost a presidential election since, although the last one was definitely much closer. President Lai Ching-te was only elected with 40% of the vote because the KMT and a upstart party called the TPP, Taiwan People's Party, they split the vote, the anti-DPP vote. I think a lot of people are like me, they started off being wanting to give the DPP a chance, and they have become really disappointed with the poor governance. Meanwhile, the KMT, they've been unable to defend themselves against the charges of despotism and being anti-democracy. And it's because they wanted to tell the truth in a partial manner, and they didn't want to tell the whole truth, which is that, like you said before, a lot of the people they killed were not like Taiwanese separatists, pro-democracy dissidents, right? They were commies. And they wanted to separate the good victims they want to atone sincerely for. Ma Ying-jeou went to the 228 memorial every year and bawled his eyes out. But now, to bring things like from the past right back to the bleeding edge of news, when the new KMT chairwoman, Zheng Lee-Wen, when she went to Ma Changding, where many of the victims of White Terror were executed, she was criticized. She was criticized by the DPP and the KMT establishment alike. And the KMT establishment basically criticized her for affirming the Chinese Communist Party's version of history by mourning these commies who were rightfully shot and being disloyal to the memory of Chiang Kai-shek. Like, they wanted to atone for the right kind of victims, not the wrong kind of victims. But the fact of the matter is, the majority of the victims were the wrong kind of victims, right? Meanwhile, the DPP, who used to go to Ma Changding all the time, lay flowers, and counted the dead commies kind of as their own. They basically scrubbed their ideology from the victims and made them out to be pro-democracy, pro-Taiwanese separatist victims, a proto-Taiwan independence maybe. But now all of a sudden they remember, Actually, they were commies. It's very, very problematic for the KMT chairwoman to go there. So it's like, okay, they're the same, literally the same dead people. How can they be like proto-Taidu martyrs for one occasion in the past when you wanted to politicize their executions? And now they're a bunch of commies, and the KMT chairwoman is capitulating to communism by going to commemorate their executions. It's like, do they think that we have the memory of goldfish? Apparently they do.
Yeah, I think that's. I see a lot of parallels actually between Taiwan and the rest of the West, like particularly United States. Both are in the grip of the neoliberal ideology, and both of them are developed into because they're mature economies. Now they're kind of facing all kind of bottleneck. They're facing all the problem that come with neoliberal economics. All the wealth is now accrued to the top 1%, and the people at the bottom, they have very dim economic prospect. And then you have then they just turn on the propaganda machine through the media to like you say, they assume people have the memory of goldfish.
Well, I actually started the Taipei Neolibs Club. I was very associated with the online neoliberals. And for me, it's just what appears to accord with my perception of reality for basically my whole life, right? I grew up in the end of history moment. The world is flat made perfect sense. Coming collapse of China. I read that, the year after it came out in 2002. And I think it just got to the point where I think the predictions were going in the wrong way, and I saw the goalposts just getting constantly shifted. And that's actually my advice for people who are feeling really confused in this world, and maybe if you can feel your IQ dropping due to all the copium you're consuming. This is how you figure out who's telling the truth and who's dishing out the propaganda, right? Both sides uses propaganda, of course. They want to tell the story from their point of view. So for every 5 minutes you devote to the kind of media that's on your side, just give 1 minute to the others. And you don't have to take their word for anything. You just need to listen to them and kind of take a mental note of what they're predicting and just see which side is predicting the future better. I think that's a really, really good first step. And then also look for which side are presenting the arguments with more granularity and which side is kind of sliding more into black and white. You're either with us or against us, or moral cudgels, or kind of almost of a personal sanction scheme where if you're saying the wrong things, the rest of your arguments are automatically invalid. If they're doing that, that's a side that's probably trying to propagandize you. Well, both sides are, but they're the one that needs more hopium and copium in their narrative to make it stand up.
Yeah, I think people just need to develop a better media literacy. I mean, a lot of time you can still glean useful information from the media reports, but you just got to understand their angle. You got to understand who is paying them, who is funding them, why they are, you got to understand they have agenda. Peel away at the agenda and to see what kind of useful information you can still glean out of it. I'm really interested in how like I said, I was interested in your political transformation, because I noticed at one point you were posting on X, you were saying, okay, what is the DPP doing? Their anti-nuclear stance is totally detrimental to the Taiwan's national security, because Taiwan need the nuclear energy, need to develop nuclear stockpile in order to defend itself against the imminent threat from mainland. But now you're taking a much more nuanced view toward the cross-strait relations. How did that come about?
Well, I think the DPP should keep the nuclear power plants on perspective to defend itself against a blockade or whatever perspective is very much actually the US standard line, because they need Taiwan to at least, not just flop over completely, right? That wouldn't really serve their purposes. So I was pushing that point of view to try and move the DPP. And I know that their biggest sponsor was the Americans. So that seemed to be like the most effective way to do that. So a lot of it was just like lobbying, like trying to solve a problem of how to make the DPP do the right thing, despite
That's smart, actually.
having to take a political hit for that. But I think eventually I just realized, actually talking to a lot of people who either are from military families or have a military reporter friend, and it gradually, again, it's like a sudden, and then you get a light bulb moment, but you don't get it because of the proximate piece of information you encounter before the light bulb moment, but because all of a sudden you gathered enough information to see the picture, see the whole picture. And I was like, oh my God, there's no way. Like Taiwan, back in the 90s, where if Taiwan wanted to declare independence, we should have done it in the 90s. Because when we first democratized, I think we are about 1/50th or 1/60th of China's population. But we had like 40% of their GDP. Their military was completely useless, and the United States could just completely obliterate them. And so that was a time, if the DPP was serious about Taiwanese independence, when they should have really pushed that agenda, right? Also, I think that would have been a great time for the KMT, if they were serious, which they say they are, about staying true to their Chinese roots, to work out their differences with the Communist Party of China, because that was their moment of maximum leverage. And there was a lot on the table back then that's no longer on the table right now, that would have kept a lot more of Taiwan's autonomy, would have guaranteed a lot more of Taiwan's democracy remaining preserved, Taiwan's rights of free speech. Those things were not just on the table then, they were eagerly offered up by the other side in an attempt to court Taiwan into reunification. It would have meant so much for China back then in terms of everything that Taiwan had to offer. We ended up offering it in a back channel way anyhow, because as trade and the economy started moving cross-straits, even as politically we remain at odds, we began like trading like crazy, and we were often the preferred middle partner between American companies and Taiwanese and Chinese manufacturers. In between, you need the Taiwanese layer of contract manufacturers. The crudest way I've heard this said by an American business person is, we like it when we tell the Taiwanese what to do and the Taiwanese tell the Chinese what to do. And so
well,
Taiwan,
I mean, that's a Foxconn model, right? That's basically a Foxconn model.
that was a Foxconn model. And
yeah.
For years, Taiwan got rich off that, but not in relative terms. China was starting from such a low base and growing so quickly that the relative balance of power switched very quickly between the Taiwan Straits, and the Taiwanese were no longer able to be a hard target for the Chinese anymore. I think Rand Corporation basically said in 2006 in a paper that according to their war games, they can't be convinced that America can actually, even if it's trying, can actually protect Taiwan in a cross-strait contingency, right? And eventually, the Taiwanese layer in the middle, we were, surprise Pikachu face, we were replaced. And we thought it could never happen to us, but it did. Now it's happening to the Americans. They realize, oh my God, I thought the Chinese would always need somebody in Cupertino to design phones. And it turns out they don't. So now they're panicking. So we panicked first, now they're panicking. And the whole situation is one that could have been resolved in a more considered, from a position of advantage, with dignity on both sides. I feel like is now descending quickly into a game of scrambling when people realize all at once that something that they thought was impossible is already happening. And now, how do we resolve the situation? Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Taiwan had a like opportunity of a lifetime during the 90s to have a very a settlement that's much to Taiwan's favor. But at that moment, you have to remember in the 90s or even up to early 2000, this was a time of end of history. This was the time of the end of history. And this was the time of Gordon Chan's Coming Class of China. So a lot of people did believe, I believe even the Taiwan top leadership believe that they just have to wait China out because there's coming Class of China. We can just wait them out. And so I think that's why they lost that opportunity. This is my opinion.
I think so. And I think status quo forever became the default belief of most Taiwanese, because you have to understand they live their whole lifetime under the threat of Chinese invasion, and it never happens. Like, after a while, you just become numb to it, and you don't really think rationally about why it didn't happen in the past and what condition might have changed that might cause it to happen in the future. And I do notice this phenomenon that's really, really, really interesting and weirdly universal is people who make bad geopolitical calls often end up losing also their ability to self-correct. And they double down on the bad decision over and over again because almost as if facing up to it is too painful. And I think the bad decision in Taiwan's part is thinking that America will remain stronger than China forever, and thus Taiwan could enjoy status quo forever, kind of balancing between China and the United States and getting benefits from both sides. The metaphor I like to use is we are a little dinghy, like a little lifeboat, and we're attached to a much bigger mothership that was the US. And we could rest on that dinghy and just kind of ignore like where it is we have to go because it felt like it was secure enough. And now we're at a moment in history where the cord has been cut. We are no longer attached to the United States mothership. The United States mothership is actually fighting for its own survival right now. So they don't have time to take care of us. And in that position, it's a lot different to argue for status quo forever. It doesn't mean you have to jump out of the lifeboat. I'm not advocating for reunification tomorrow. I'm not waving a red flag and saying long live the Communist Party of China. I'm not. I'm saying we are now in a situation where we are a lifeboat that's looking for land, looking for safety, and that has to happen now. There is no status quo anymore for me, actually. I think what we're in now is a different phase of history.
You have a very sensible position, but I'm sure your political shift has created a lot of shock and consternation among, your former associates. Did you get a lot of pushback on like, Angelica, what are you doing? Why are you being an apologist for the CCP now? Why are you betraying the cause of Taiwan? Did that happen?
An insane amount of that happened. I was totally unprepared for what was about to happen when I came out as a pragmatist on this issue. You have to understand, this is not my first rodeo. I've kind of changed my mind a lot about a lot of things throughout my life. And I felt like I had to do that because I literally grew up between different cultures with different conflicting ideas of what's right and wrong. And they're constantly deluded into thinking that that is a universal and only right way to do things, right? So you cannot have the ability to move in and out of these cultures and truly be connected to them without also having the ability to make up your mind and change it once in a while. So I changed my mind, by the way, from offshore wind, being a supporter of offshore wind, in fact, having that be my livelihood. And when I switched to the pro-nuclear side, I had to bite the hand that fed me. And I had to basically, I backstabbed the offshore wind industry in the eyes of the offshore wind industry. But I thought I did it gracefully. I thought I did it with a lot of space for acknowledging people's hard work. And I did it with careful attention to say that no technology is good or bad. It's just suitable or unsuitable. And this is what went wrong. In Taiwan's case, not that offshore wind shouldn't exist in Taiwan, but that it should be done better, and we shouldn't be so reliant on it because you literally don't know when the wind is going to be blowing. So I did that, and I thought I did that really gracefully. There was, of course, there was always blowback, but I handled it no problem. And I thought I acquitted myself really well. I managed to keep a lot of my friends who were less ideological about their professions. So I thought, well, the same thing is going to happen, right? I'm just updating a few priors, duh. The world's been changing. Haven't you noticed the Trump tariffs? I mean, in my mind, I thought my moves, like every step of the way, was perfectly reasonable. But it turned out there's a red line. And when you start saying nice things about China, you've crossed it. Like, you can acknowledge China's progress. You can acknowledge even how precarious Taiwan's position is, as long as you always couch it in terms of this is a terrible thing and we must remedy it, and we can remedy it. As soon as you start to acknowledge that maybe the gap's gotten too big to remedy, or if you even go further than that and say, wow, China is really impressive. They've done some great things. And in the long run, reunification between China and Taiwan in a form that, if we get good terms and get to actually negotiate terms that allows us to keep the way of life that we're used to, it might not be a terrible thing. It's certainly a much better position than Ukraine found itself in. Or even further than that, China could have turned Taiwan into an ashtray probably anytime after 2006, and the United States would have had limited means to do anything about it. But they didn't, because they don't want war. They still see us as their compatriots, and they really don't want a forced reunification. And that requires us, in order to keep the peace, to actually also reach out with goodwill and address their concerns. And if both sides kind of put their cards on the table, then we can settle it on the negotiation table and not on the battlefield.
That is a very pragmatic position, and before I only know, another Taiwanese person, Shang Yu, who I'm sure you know,
Yeah.
and I thought he was kind of the lone voice in the woods, talking about having a better, maintain a better relationship with mainland China and being pro-unification. But I did notice now you are not alone. I mean, there's a famous Taiwanese influencer, the Gym Boss, who recently switched his position on the issue of cross-strait relationship and reunification. Because I remember watching Jim Boss rant a couple of years back, I think during COVID time, and he was saying oh yeah, like if the communists come here, we will fight them on the beach, we'll fight them in the streets. We got guns, man. We got tons of guns. And guess what? The Taiwanese youth today, they have nothing. They have nothing already. They don't have a good job prospect. They can't afford the expensive housing. The only thing we have left is the ability to ship posts online. And if you communists to take even that from us, we will fight you to the death. And when I saw that rant, I'm like, wow, that guy is so close. He's so close. And then and then a couple of years later, he suddenly flipped, and he's now like touring the mainland and telling his followers how great, how impressive the mainland China infrastructure is. Do you think that there's a larger shift going on? I mean,
Absolutely.
or really?
Absolutely. My change did not happen in a vacuum. I like to tell my Twitter followers sometimes it's not that Angelica just suddenly decided freedom and democracy is bad. I am the canary on your Twitter timeline telling of a greater political change is happening at rapid speed in Taiwan. And the change is happening again because of wider global changes that we've seen that's happened in the past few years very, very quickly. In a way, if Ukraine is the physical battlefield where the West is testing itself against the rest, Taiwan is the invisible ideological battlefield where the same thing is happening. 3 factors: the rise of China, the banditization of America, and Taiwan's own stagnation. I think those are the 3 factors that is causing this political earthquake that we are still convulsing through right now. Outsiders don't see it because they stick to the English language media, and the English language media is completely aligned with the DPP view of events. So it's always, oh, why is KMT being so awful? Look, there are protesters on the street because the KMT is being so awful. And they'll never get the full story from the other side because they'll simply delete it before they even read it. If they get to read it, if it's written about, which it isn't in the Western press, and then they're really surprised when things don't line up with their expectations. Don't take it out on me. This is like all of Taiwan. Or if not all of Taiwan, I would say a lot of the middle voter who used to be more sympathetic to the DPP and pro status quo forever, a lot of them are suddenly remembering, gee, we're Chinese, or China's actually not doing so bad. And especially the Gen Zs, they grew up never experiencing the Cold War mentality. They grew up when China was already like not doing bad economically and rising quickly in terms of the economy. And in an age of unprecedented, I'll say, relative lack of opportunity in Taiwan, because you have to understand wages have been stagnant for decades here, but housing prices go up every year. Before I was born, my mom was a real estate agent, and the real estate boom in the 80s was so potent that she sold houses out of an apartment project before they were even complete, right? She'll just point at a model of what this project's going to look like, and she'll take people into a model of the apartment and say, this is what your apartment will look like. And people bought off the back of that because they were so eager after they built their own factory, got their first bucket of gold, as we say in Chinese. When you get your first bucket of gold, you know what Chinese people like to do. They like to buy their first piece of real estate. And then they like to buy more, and then they go up in value. So they keep buying more and more and more and more. And this is so fantastic. Good for you if you were doing that in the 80s, 90s, the noughties, whatever. It just keeps going up, right? You pay more and more for it, but then you always end up the winner. It's like a casino where it's just like, let me keep betting on black because it's always coming up black. But it's not so good if you're a young person and you graduate into a stagnant wage environment, and then you realize, damn it, there's no way I can afford to buy an apartment. I'm going to have to live with my parents forever. People put off major life decisions, marriage. People don't dare have kids unless they feel like they can put a roof over their own heads. So you have a generation that sees the rise of China and look back at Taiwan and see not the thriving rainbow boba democracy, world-beating TSMC state that everybody else sees. They see like no hope for the future, no hope of ever getting on their feet, be independent. And even if their mom bought them their first apartment or whatever like that, they never feel like they can truly be their own person. They feel like their future is like imagine the ceiling slowly lowering on Taiwanese potential generation after generation as housing prices get higher and higher. I've heard somebody describe rising real estate prices as a tax on future generations, and I think that's very apt.
Yeah, I see so much parallels between Taiwan and the West, particularly United States. I mean, like
Yeah.
this Gen Z in US is facing the same bleak economic future, the same rising housing prices, and same anemic job market. And because both of these places are practicing liberal neoliberal economics, but the what I see in the United States, though, is like the U.S. voters are so demoralized, after being cheated by their politicians who promised change. First Obama and then Trump. Do you think it would turn out different for Taiwan? Do you think that there will be actually lead to political change in Taiwan?
I think it already has. I really want to mention how extraordinary it is that the KMT elected somebody like Lee-Wen to be their leader, because she's actually somebody who's determined to get cross-strait peace done. And she will say things like, I aim to extend peace between the two sides of the Taiwan Straits, and the first step to doing that is resolving the past conflict between the nationalists and the communists. And that doesn't sound like much, but it cuts to the truth, right? We were two sides of a civil war. The Republic of China was the losing side of a civil war. And the reason why we were able to survive until now is US support, right? And the US supported us not out of the goodness of their own hearts, but because we are a valuable geopolitical bulwark, kind of a little thorn in China's side that they can push or withdraw as it befitted the rest of their plans geopolitically. Actually, I think the older generation of KMT have more realism about that part, that we are a part of their vassalship system, because they know how we were choked back. I think at one point Chiang Kai-shek was getting quite adventuresome, and a lot of all that white terror stuff is just your typical Cold War fascist versus communism stuff, right? And not only did the U.S. not only did the U.S. initially wanted to just abandon Taiwan, but I think they realized that Korea did so badly that they needed another check on China. So they scurried back and defended us. It was a process of repeated and kind of undignified abandonment and rescue, right? I think I'm reading a book right now called Derecognition, and it's written by the plucky head of the American Chamber of Commerce at the time when derecognition happened under Carter. And I think people forget that when Carter derecognized Taiwan, he very much assumed, the people in his administration and in general very much assumed, that would be the end of free China. You have the pathetic history of Taiwanese people flagging down random American businessmen in the streets of Taipei, asking for assurances. We are not really abandoned, are we? And the blow of derecognition was softened by the Taiwan Relations Act. That was very much lobbied by this head of AmCham at the time. And he made a real difference in pushing for it, maybe. I mean, that's his book, so his point of view. But you see a lot of uncertainty in there. I guess that's the beginning of strategic ambiguity, right? But so the old school KMT remember the betrayals of the past, but the DPP, in a way, they don't. Maybe their top level leadership does. They realize the game that's being played, but their rank and file believers are naive. They've never lived through derecognition. They never lived through, as a KMT did, like our nuclear weapons program being taken away from us by the Americans. The KMT experienced all those things as betrayals, but for the DPP, they didn't even exist, or they were too busy fighting the KMT. Oh, by the way, interesting fun fact, a lot of the founders of the DPP were actually communist sympathizers, and they only got kicked out of the DPP later when they decided that Taiwanese independence was going to be their big thing.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I hope to have you back, because this is still an ongoing story. And there's a lot of eyes right now focused on Taiwan, and there's a lot of misunderstanding. You have all these BBC alarming articles about Taiwan being the most dangerous place in the world. I think
that was The Economist 3 years ago, but that's the tenor. That's a tenor of the reporting, and that's a level of the reporting. And actually, I see it as kind of a tentative good sign that the number of news articles written about Taiwan has fallen off markedly since the COVID peak. I think that was the peak of Taiwan, the most dangerous place in the world hysteria. I think actually the reunification threat, the sort of forced reunification threat, has only increased on China's side as they become more confident in themselves. They face the US down in a tariff war, and they really powered up their military so much that we can see in recent events. Not that they fought in any wars, but there are signs that their military is getting so powerful that the United States probably wouldn't be wise to try and confront them in their own front yard. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out. I would really encourage people to keep an eye out on Lee-Wen and the discourse around her. To me, she and Jim Boss are two people that might have changed the course of the whole conversation that we're having. It's always a question, right? Do people like that arrive because the pressure in history reached a certain level, or do they shape history? I don't know. But I think they definitely shape short-term history. I don't know if long-term history was always going to go in one way or another. I prefer to think that we have the ability to shape history. I believe that World War I wasn't inevitable. World War II wasn't inevitable. The war in Ukraine was not inevitable. But it is very, very hard when you have those historical forces moving in a certain way to be wise enough to avoid war. And it takes work, and it takes to dissolve historical grudges that are 8 decades in the making. It requires a certain kind of ability to rise above, right? Otherwise, you're always stuck. You're always stuck in the conflicts of the past. But if Taiwan can do it, it will be pretty amazing. It's pretty much the equivalent of hitting the geopolitical jackpot. Imagine being like America's ally, loyal little brother in the Pacific for 8 decades, right? We benefited a lot from that. We got rich from that early. And then in 2025 to 2035, or whatever we're calling this period, if we can slowly, safely, and in a way that doesn't compromise our core values, what we seek out of life, if we can instead join to become not just a part of Team China, but a part of China itself as it rises to become the richest, most powerful geopolitical actor, not just in this region, but perhaps even in the world, that's like Yahtzee. That's like definitely, I mean, to put it in very mercenary terms, that's not something to mourn. It's something to celebrate. Unfortunately, it's also very, very hard. And I think there are forces working in both directions on this island right now, which is why it's so chaotic, but nobody's talking about it.
Well, that's why we're going to have you back. This is fascinating conversation. I'm glad I had you on the show. It's always refreshing to have to talk with an intelligent person from a perspective of Taiwan. Rather than having some white people talking about Taiwan as the most dangerous place. So thank you very much again, Angela. If people want to follow you on social media or elsewhere, where would they go?
Well, on Twitter, you can just follow me at Angelica Ong. But I would highly recommend doing a web search for typology, Taipollogy. And either on YouTube or on Google, you'll probably come up on my Substack or my new YouTube channel. Eventually, I hope to turn the content of my YouTube channel into a podcast too, like on Apple and whatever. Maybe Carl can give me some tips on that.
What is the name of your YouTube channel? Just Typology?
Typology. Yeah, type it in. Typology.
Like typology as in like Taipei-pology?
Yeah, just Taipolgy.
Okay. I'll put the links and in the description below, links to your Twitter page, your Substack, and your YouTube. So for people that wish to follow Angela, make sure to check those links. She has very interesting insight on Taiwan and this relationship with China and United States. Highly recommend. Thank you very much for making the time to speak with us. And I would definitely looking forward to our next conversation.
No problem. It's been a pleasure. And I can honestly say I never thought I'd be in this situation, but here we are.
Yeah, it's I think on that note, thank you for tuning